Hello everybody, welcome back to the Fantasy Falls Theater. I would like to start by saying that I am still pretty sick, actually. I thought I'd be over this by now. It seems to come and go as I get stressed, so what's going to happen is I might have to pause this recording multiple times, because even saying this right now is getting me a little winded. So, while recording the epilogue, I will do my very, very best to give you the best experience. However, if I sound like a dying toad, you know the reason. Let's begin. Chapter 16, Epilogue. 3 years later. Sprig, Anne shouts up the stairs. Where did you put my sword? Behind the couch, he shouts back, and Anne has to repress the urge to growl. What the hell were you doing with it behind the couch? He couldn't reach the chips, a second, more feminine voice calls back. So he stabbed them? Anne holds up the offending weapon that, indeed, there is a large bag of chips impaled on the end of it. Yeah, he's stupid. Hey, kids, stop yelling across the house. Anne winces. Hot Pop's hearing has started to go in the past year, and him complaining about noise has become a more and more common occurrence. Sorry, Hot Pop, the two voices chorus from upstairs, and Anne rounds the corner of the living room to poke her head into the kitchen. Sure enough, Hot Pop is bent over a cauldron that holds what is likely supposed to be breakfast, but if she's lucky, she'll be gone before she has to choke it down. He catches her gaze and over the top of it, and straightens to fix her with a resin brow. What's got you up so bright and early anyway? A sheepish smile stretches over Anne's lips, and she reaches up to tug at her ponytail. Marcy and Sasha want to have a meeting. I think we're finally going to go after the temples. If possible, Hot Pop's brows rise higher. Why now? He asks, carefully neutral, and adds a handful of something definitely not meant to be added to the bubbling broth. Thought y'all were getting comfortable here. Anne winces again, but holds on to that sheepish smile with as much gusto as she can manage. We are, she assures. Just, we're almost adults, Hot Pop. If we don't try now, there's not really a point in trying again later. He nods, a strange look coming over his face. When you say almost adults, he starts, and Anne brings her hand from her hair to her face. I swear to Frog, Hot Pop. I'm just saying there's no harm in getting a jump on it. I'm not proposing to Marcy. Anne shouts in a huff, ignoring the heat quickly traveling to her cheeks. You've been dating for 3 years, he pleads with his best attempt at puppy eyes. And we'll keep dating until we're out of college. I'm not having this discussion again. A chorus of snickers come from up the stairs, and Anne casts her best glare in their direction. 2 impish faces of teenage frogs stare back at her, looking equally amused by her embarrassment. Anne and Marcy sitting in a tree. Okay, that's it. Goodbye. She makes a mad dash for the door. Anne, Hot Pop shouts. She slams against the door with all the force of someone who can outrun a leopard mantis. What? She shulks, spinning on her heel and sinking back against the already abused wood. Hot Pop just raises his brows again. Hand? She glances down at the offending appendage, only to find an empty space. A groan claws its way out of her throat, and she stomps her way back into her basement room to retrieve the metal contraption. It's really more of a claw than a hand. The fingers are made of 2 movable sections, one that might have been her middle and forefinger, the other her ring and pinky. The thumb is covered in thick leather padding as to prevent itself from accidentally scratching anything like her first prosthetic had done. The result is effective, even if it looks like she's been cursed to do the Spock hand thing permanently. She makes it all the way back up the stairs into the front door before Hot Pop coughs loudly. She pauses, giving him a flat look. Cloak? She groans. It's not that cold. You're gonna be flying. He bites back, crossing his arms. Humor me. She drags her feet over the coat rack to retrieve the purple cloak the planners had given her as her 17th birthday present. It itches a little when she clips it over her armor. Happy? Hot Pop hums, dissatisfied, and taps a finger against his chin, an impish smirk stretching over his face. Anne narrows her eyes. Finally, he spreads his arm wide, smirk still firmly in place. Hug? Anne rolls her eyes, but it's more for show than anything else. You're going soft in your old age, Hot Pop, she grumbles, but bends down to hug him anyway, taking solace in the familiar sensation of his chuckle against her temple. Be home in time for dinner, is his only response. She stands back up and offers him a salute on her way out. Will do. Utopia hasn't changed since her last visit. Then again, her last visit was 3 days ago, so she'd be more concerned if it had. The rebuilt outer wall shines in its normal shade of cerulean, and the streets are just as packed with bustling bodies of newts and toads alike. The rail system between Utopia and Toadberg is still under construction, but it looks like they finished the station in Toadberg at least. After what she referred to as Grimes' siege, the Utopian Council had decided that the first and most logical punishment for the Toad Army for their involvement was to be the ones to complete the reconstruction of Utopia's outer walls. They had done so, but the project had taken so long that by the time it was complete, the Toads' camp had turned into more of a shanty town. It had taken more than a couple of negotiations, and Marcy and Sasha acting as ambassadors between the two parties, to get it signed off as an official neighbor to Utopia. It was still mostly constructed out of makeshift wooden supports and tarps, but more and more of Toadberg was becoming permanent structures of brick and mortar by the day. It probably helped that the elected mayor of Toadberg was willing to accept any suggestions that Marcy gave him. Anne glides over Toadberg, Utopia's outer walls, and up through the rings of the city with little more than an appreciative glance. Flying may be the fastest mode of transportation in Amphibia, but it's also Anne's least favorite. She doesn't think she really has a fear of heights, more just one of the inevitable damage that falling could do to her pretty well-battered body. Especially if Marcy was serious about wanting to finally go back to Earth. She honestly doesn't know how to feel about that. On the one hand, she had a point. If they didn't go back now, there really wasn't a point in ever going back. They were almost adults. On the other, they were much more adapted to Amphibia than Earth at this point. Anne wasn't even sure if she remembered what her mother's voices sounded like anymore, or whether her father had a beard or not when she left. She touches down just in front of the palace, sliding off of her sparrow's back with a practiced ease. A stable hand is taking the reins from her almost before she can register it. A couple familiar-looking guards shout greetings as she breezes past, taking stairs 2 at a time and stopping by the third gargoyle to press it on its second toe. The gargoyle lifts several feet, and Anne ducks through the newly revealed passage. She pops back out just outside Marcy's corridor, darkened gray stone giving way to a sunlit hallway lined with familiar green tapestries, her footsteps suddenly becoming light as she quietly sneaks her way to the door. It opens without so much as a creak of wood or unoiled hinges, revealing the hunched figure whirring over dioramas inside. Dark hair hangs over her face with rounded cheeks and a sharp nose, golden goggles just barely peeking out from the strands. Her coat hangs over her chair, discarded in favor of the sleeveless tunic behind that allows her arms to be covered in lines and lines of frantically scrawled notes. Some in English, others in Amphibian, a few in Mandarin for flavor, most of it smudged, beyond what any normal person could reasonably read. The gloves on her hands, once green, have long since gone black from all the ink. Anne watches, fond, as a current of words comes out of Marcy's mouth. Most of it is just as indecipherable as the notes on her arms. Her quill moves at a pace that would be enviable to a hummingbird. Occasionally, she reaches down to her belt to dip the tip of her quill in the inkwell she has secured there, heedless of the drops of ink that occasionally stain her trousers and boots. Marcy blows a puff of air into her face to try and get some of the hair out of it, then goes to wipe her arm over her forehead, leaving behind a streak of black. A disgruntled squeak claws from her throat, and Anne restrains the urge to giggle. All for nothing, it appears, as Marcy doesn't so much as flinch when Anne's arms circle around her waist, nor does her curtain of thoughts pause for longer than a second. Could Anne do the strength trial? Maybe, but if there's anything to do with grip, that might be an issue. Oh, on that note, Sasha might have trouble too. Shoot! Maybe I should have Sasha do the first trial and get her to train with me for the third. She trails off, but only because Anne lets out a disappointed squeak. What gave me away? Marcy chuckles soft and flips the cap down on the inkwell at her waist, sealing it with a soft click before placing the quill down on one of the many tables dotted around the room. She turns in Anne's hold and grins before tapping her left foot to her right. It lets out a quiet beat before extending to an unnatural length to allow Marcy to press a kiss to her cheek. Anne's last growth spurt left her as the tallest of the three of them, something Sasha still took as a personal slight. But Marcy seemed to take it as a challenge to find more and more creative ways of showing her affection. "You still need to watch your footwork, Leadfoot," she chastises, and Anne can't help but pout. "Shouldn't I be calling you that?" She taps Marcy's extended foot with her toe for emphasis. Marcy snorts. "Just because I have several different customizable attachments for my leg." "Oh, shut up." Anne cuts Marcy off with a kiss, getting the startled squeak she had been hoping for earlier. She must have tapped her foot again, or maybe it's on a timer, because she lowers slowly until Anne has to brace her hands on the table in front of them for support. Marcy's hands wrap up her arms to her neck, firmly keeping her in place. Eventually, they pull away for breath, but it's a slow thing. Their noses still resting together. Still, very much closer than necessary. Marcy is smiling. "You're early," she whispers. Anne chuckles. "I wanted to see you." "How sweet." "I know, I'm adorable." "You're an asshole is what you are." "I'm hurt." "Take it up with your therapist." That gets a full laugh out of her, and Marcy's grin just widens. 3 years is a long time to date a person, especially when you're intermittently dealing with long distance, near-death experiences, and enough trauma to kill a horse. But Anne thinks that their relationship is the stronger for it. It's certainly more interesting. "Where's Sasha?" She casts a glance at the conspicuously empty room. No angry-faced blonde in sight. Marcy sighs and releases her grip on Anne's neck, but doesn't quite pull away. She jumps, sitting atop the desk, and swings her feet a bit in frustration. "Toadberg," she grumbles, and Anne lets her brows rise. "Mayor Percy having her give a pep talk again?" "Worse," Marcy mutters. "He asked her to help him prepare for re-election." Anne winces. Sasha's come a long way, but politics are a pretty good way to get that old-fashioned mean streak to rear its ugly head. "She's gonna be late?" she guesses. "Oh, definitely." Marcy chuckles, and Anne shakes her head, finally retracting from the embrace. She rounds the table and drops herself into one of the several chairs scattered about the place. Honestly, at this point, Marcy's bedroom is turning into the new war room. You'd think she'd plan around this. Marcy sighs, a serious expression falling over her face. She reaches up and tugs at the base of one of her gloves. "I think she might be having cold feet. This is a big step, you know." Anne cocks her head. "What do you mean she's having cold feet?" "She suggested it," Marcy says, as if it's obvious. "I was fully prepared to live out the rest of our lives here, but she said she wanted to make a final go at it." Anne mutters, honestly somewhat surprised. "Wasn't she the one who suggested we stay in the first place?" "To be fair," Marcy interrupts, "we were all thinking it." Anne hums. It doesn't stop her gaze from wandering to the map pinned above Marcy's bed. Some architectural plans for Toadberg are pinned up beside it, but the majority of the map is filled with microscopic notes that Marcy can only read with the help of her goggles, and a normal person would be forgiven for mistaking for lines. "Speaking of Toadberg," she starts, and Marcy lets out a groan, sliding off the desk with an overdramatic thump. "I'm not overworking myself, you can ask Lady Olivia. So you're using your arms instead of the very nice notebook I got you for our anniversary. Why?" Slowly, a narrow pair of eyes appear over the top of Marcy's desk. "What was that?" "I already used it." Anne sighs and runs her prosthetic back through her hair. "You're gonna make me go gray before I even reach 20. Please, if any of us are gonna go gray, it's gonna be me. That's not something to be proud of, Marbles." Marcy sticks out her tongue. Anne rolls her eyes. She grabs a loose piece of paper and tears off the corner to ball it up and chuck at Marcy's head. There's a shrill squawk. Marcy grabs her own projectile, an ink blot, and lugs it back. Anne ducks, sliding to the floor, and searches for another object for retribution. To no avail, it seems. There's the sound of many knickknacks clattering about, and Anne only has time to glance up in abject terror as Marcy dumps a crate of writing instruments and assorted desk accessories over her head. She spits out a mouthful of quills to the trail of Marcy's laughter. She narrows her eyes. Target acquired. Marcy only gets a couple of seconds to revel in her victory before Anne tackles her, digging her fingers into her side and getting a shriek in her ear for the effort. Anne, no. She cuts herself off with another shriek of laughter, and Anne lets a manic grin stretch across her face. Who needs to watch their footwork now? Marcy squirms beneath her, trying desperately to get free, but only managing to knock her goggles askew. That's not even... Marcy squeaks again, and Anne chuckles, continuing her onslaught. What was that, princess? I'm having trouble understanding. Oh, shut up. Marcy manages to get a leg free and slams it against the floor. The force is strong enough to rock Anne off balance, and Marcy takes the opportunity to flip them so she's on top. She catches Anne's hands and easily pins them above her head, looming over her with a smirk and a green glint in her eyes. Who's the princess now? Anne grins her best innocent smile. Still you? Marcy pouts. Smartass. That's your job. Marcy snorts and leans down, pressing another kiss to Anne's lips. The hands holding hers by the wrist loosen, and Anne takes the opportunity to reach up and cup Marcy's cheek with her good hand. The metal one braces against her hip. They learned pretty quickly after Anne got the thing that she had to be careful with what she held in it. Pressure control wasn't exactly a precise science, and she lost count of the amount of times she accidentally bruised someone while trying to shake their hand. Sasha had similar issues, but her prosthetic was a bit more finely tuned to allow movement for her individual fingers, so her issue was more pinching people than crushing their limbs. Anne wasn't aware of any immediate issues with Marcy, but then again, she spent half of her free time tweaking it, so it had probably blown up at least once. It had blown up 3 times. Am I interrupting? Marcy pulls away from Anne with an audible pop, and Anne immediately releases her in favor of clapping her hands to her face. Sasha stands against the doorframe in all of her smug, snarky glory. The sleeves of her finely pressed white shirt have been folded up to the elbows, and one of the suspenders that usually keep her trousers aloft has come unlatched. Sweat sticks her bandana to her neck, but does nothing to keep her mop of blonde hair out of her face. Sasha! Marcy smiles wide, bright and nervous, hands waving around her face. What are you doing here? One of Sasha's brows lift, smirk still firmly in place. I sleep across the hall. Shut the fuck up, asshole. Anne groans from her place on the floor. Her face has taken on an impressive shade of red. Sasha chuckles. Oh, I'm sorry. I forget how grumpy she gets when I interrupt makeout time. Anne lets her hand slide down from her face, but only so she can settle Sasha with a glare. I am going to kill you in your sleep. Hopefully you'll have better luck than I did, she teases. When she smiles, the scars on the left side of her face stretch. The original one Anne gave her, and the second from a scuffle with a troop of rogue toads. Pro tip, don't announce your presence by declaring your cowardice. Anne frowns. Okay, that's it. Marcy, let me up. I'm shaking in my boots. I will steal your fucking fingers. Don't think I won't. Sasha. Marcy interrupts the impending argument. Don't be a pest. Sasha's hands raise in surrender, but the smirk is still firmly in place. Of course, m'lady. She makes a show of bowing at the waist while Marcy rolls her eyes. It takes a couple of minutes for Marcy to rearrange all of the papers and knickknacks she and Anne knocked over in their scuffle, Sasha making suggestive faces the whole time. Anne shows her a particular finger, and Sasha responds with 2. Anne stinks out her tongue. Sasha reaches up to pull at the flesh beneath her right eye, only to pause and raise a brow. When Anne only manages a confused expression back, a grin tugs its way over her face. Anne stiffens. That grin never means anything good. Oh, Anne. Sasha's tone has taken on that saccharine, sweet tone that always denotes something that is going to embarrass her for years to come. She reaches out and plucks something from a fold in Anne's waistband, holding it to the light. Is this what I think it is? What? Anne only gets half the word out of her mouth before she's interrupted by a gasp. She glances over to see Marcy staring at Sasha's offering with a shit-eating grin on her face. Oh no. Anna Banana! Marcy cries and claps a hand over her chest over dramatically. Is that an engagement ring? What? Anne whirls around to see that, indeed, the thing clutched in Sasha's outstretched hand is indeed an engagement ring, and a fairly old-looking one at that. It has a well-worn golden band and a sizable diamond implanted on the top, held on either side by the sigil of the Utopian crown. Heat goes rushing through Anne's face as she realizes what happened. Hop pop. Sasha bursts into a laugh that sounds like it hurts, falling to her knees from the force of it. Marcy takes the opportunity to snatch the ring from her outstretched hand, making a show of placing it on her finger and batting her eyes in Anne's rapidly coloring face. Oh, you rapscallion, you. She places the now ring-bearing hand against her forehead in an approximation of fainting Victorian woman. And without asking the king's permission. How rebellious. Sasha is laughing so hard that no noise is coming out of her mouth, tears pouring down her cheeks. Marcy, give me the fucking... Anne lunges for the ring, only for Marcy to spin gracefully away, still doing her best impression of a Victorian bride-to-be. Such foul language! I am none too sure my father would approve. I swear to Frog. You're right, of course. Marcy comes to an abrupt stop, nearly having Anne headbutt her in the mouth. She catches her hands in her own, holding them together between them, and boasting her broadest, most shit-eating grin. We need to elope immediately. For the briefest of moments, the image of Marcy in a wedding gown flashes through her mind, and Anne almost forgets how to stand. What? Marcy! Sasha shrieks from her puddle of shaking limbs on the ground. I'm gonna fucking pee! The corners of Marcy's mouth finally split as she throws her head back in a mad cackle, leaving Anne to stew in her blushing, embarrassed state, alone with her two closest friends laughing at her misery. It's taken a long, long time to get here. 3 years of countless sleepless nights and tearful days, moments where they wanted nothing more than to just curl into a ball and stop existing. It's been 3 long, hard years, but now they can stand in a room together and joke and laugh and tease like it's the most natural thing in the world, like they are all still whole. That's more than any of them could have asked for. Marcy eventually gets a handle on herself, while Sasha manages to catch her breath, still fighting off the occasional bout of snickers. Anne just stands there, arms crossed and expression drawn into her breast approximation of a pout. You done? Marcy wipes a few errant tears from her eyes. Yeah. She slides the ring from her finger and places it in Anne's outstretched hand, but before she can fully take it back, Marcy uses the leverage to pull her in close. But I do expect to see this little guy again eventually. Red flushes back over Anne's face as Marcy pulls away, sauntering over to her desk and rearranging her makeshift diorama. Sasha lets out a wolf whistle. Anne steps on her foot. All right, girls. Marcy begins with a winning smile and spreads her arms wide. Who's ready to go home?